Hello, you're through to Books Boys. You've got Dean on the line. Who's calling?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
No
I've
problem.
been
It's
in
nice to
Northern
have you.
Ireland a few times. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and do you want to introduce yourself?
I was in Newcastle at the Sleeved Honored for a Van Morrison concert, and then I was in Belfast at the Europa for a Van Morrison concert. I found the people
Fantastic.
to be, I found the people to be lovely and welcoming, and I just said, obviously, I went back. It was great.
Nice.
So,
I have not ever had the pleasure of seeing Van Morrison, although my co-host did see him a month or two ago, but I didn't manage to make it myself. Tickets were quite expensive in the end, but it's something I'd like to do. He's obviously he's a legend, you know.
he's a legend. I mean, he's been knighted. So it's something.
Yeah, that's something indeed. And he's got a load of good songs, three or four I can think of just off the top of my head that I'd love to see live. So it'd be a nice experience. Joel, we're here to talk about your book, The Plasma Cell Report. I've got it here in front of me, and fantastic book. So before I ask you anything else, I want to ask you something that always interests me. This book, works a little bit with science and I suppose science fiction. Um, and I always wonder where people get these ideas from. But in your case, you work as a scientist yourself. So I suppose I want to ask, how much of your own experience and your work helped you to kind of create the sci-fi ideas for the book?
Well, I think if I wouldn't have been a doctor, I wouldn't have come up with the idea for the book
Hmm.
because, as you know, it's based around a disease.
Yeah.
And it came to me one day that this disease could possibly, I don't want to give away too much of the book, but produce antibodies that could so-called cure aging. And then the question became, what would be the ramifications of that? So it came to me because of being a physician, but then I got really interested in other areas,
Hmm.
such as our security agencies and the presidency and things like that, and really who's running who. It's fictionalized, but the question becomes who's really running the country.
Yeah, there's two main themes of the book, I suppose. One is this science element and this sort of reverse aging stuff, but the other is actually the political aspect, as you say. We see the president of the United States. We get to go into those types of issues, but also the security agencies, as you mentioned, the NSA in particular. And it's interesting to have those two elements, but it ties together very nicely because we have a big scientific discovery. So, of course, the big security agencies and the big politicians are going to want to maybe keep a lid on that, and they're going to want to have control of that. So, did you find that easy to bring those two elements together?
Um, I don't know if it was easy, but it was a little bit natural because the question, arose pretty early on. Well, if you can reverse aging, is it a good idea?
Yeah.
And then who would make the decision? And we do have very powerful security agencies, both in the UK and in the United States, a few other countries, um, and they're pretty secretive. But
Mm.
nowadays you can find out a lot about them. And about 80% of what I wrote about the NSA is true, and the other 20% is fictionalized. For
Mm.
instance, the Houston headquarters. Hopefully the Russians and Chinese are running around Houston looking for it because it's not really there.
Okay, so the headquarters location was fictionalized. Well, maybe, uh, as you say, to
But
put
the
someone off.
headquarters in Maryland is actually really exists,
Oh, that one
and
exists.
the agency is very very powerful. But you know, obviously they're very good at what they do, and
Mm.
they're able to listen in on whatever they want, and that's not always a bad thing. It keeps us safe.
There's pros and
So
cons, of course. Yeah, they have a purpose and they're trying to, keep the country safe, but then we have to ask these types of questions. Well, how much power do they have and how much do they know about people and this kind of thing. So there's
right,
a
but
there's a balance there.
as you know, in any good book, you have to have conflict and resolution. So I try to set up a conflict and a resolution.
Hmm.
And then a little sex never hurts, a little humor.
Yeah, yeah,
So
throw in
it
a little bit
was,
of sex. But there's a good story because, we have Katie Shepherd, of course, who's going through this reverse aging process. And it is, I don't know if it was inevitable, but she is described as, very attractive. And it maybe makes sense that there's a little bit of a love side story with the doctor who's, Innsbruck, who's working with her. So I suppose it makes sense to include that. And to personally, I really do like, a love story in almost every book if I can get one.
yeah, I mean, it did make sense. I'm sorry about the sorry about that.
No, you're okay. No, it makes
Um,
sense. Yeah.
but it sort of made sense they would fall in love and that it would be another one of the conflicts. And think it became an important part of the story.
Hmm. Something that interested me as well were the kind of, I guess I want to say family values, because we're dealing with people who are working secretively, for the NSA. And that sometimes means, working long hours, not even being able to discuss your work with your partner. And we do have, one of the chaps whose wife is pregnant at one point, and he doesn't even find out for it for a period of time because he's so busy working. And, we have a situation with one chap where the wife is saying to him, like, tell me about your work. And he just says, oh, you got to watch the news. And she says, well, which parts, And she's saying, please come home, stay at home with me. You told me you weren't going to work as much as you used to. And he's like, well, I'm doing what I think I'm supposed to do for my country. And it's interesting to me that he really puts kind of patriotism above like family values, because that's something I couldn't imagine doing. For me, like, you got to start with your own family first and worry about the country later. But it's interesting to see that
Yeah, I mean,
dynamic.
people are hooked up differently. There are obviously we have heroes that will throw their bodies over a hand grenade in order to save another soldier's life or to
Mm.
save a president or whatever. So there are people who are like that. And by the way, those characters were really, it was very hard. I don't want to give away too much of the book, but
Mm.
you know, I became very close to the characters in the book.
Mm.
I had them all sketched out. At one point, I had them all taped up on my wall, so I really understood who they were,
Sure, sure.
uh, how they would think, and what motivated them.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I'm not going to talk about the ending. We never spoil books, but I do want to ask you, I suppose, without giving detail, do you think that the ending that you gave was inevitable? Was that the only way it could have gone, or do you think there was a different way it could have gone?
um, well, actually, I heard David Mamet, the great playwright, recently, and he said that the ending of every great story is both surprising and inevitable.
Mm.
So it was inevitable because of the structure of the book, because otherwise there wouldn't have been these hearings and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. I think it surprised me. I mean, yeah, you're right, actually. You're perfectly right. It surprised me. And then the more I thought about it, I was kind of like, yeah, I can see that this is how it would go down, you know? So that's it. So is this the first novel that you've worked? I mean, we're aware that you've published many papers and so forth, but is this the first actual novel that you've done?
It's the first novel.
Yeah,
I'm working on a sequel.
yeah, that was going to be my next question then. So you're working on a second novel, and it's a sequel, direct sequel.
The sequel, yeah, obviously Innsbruck will be the through person,
Yeah, yeah, of course.
and he will. I don't want to talk too much about that, but he'll be trying to go into private practice of medicine and kind of get pulled back into it.
Right, right. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
And do we have an estimate for that next year, maybe, or what are you thinking for release?
Well, it's actually surprising how long it takes. I mean, not
Mm.
just the writing part, but then the
Editing
editing
and everything,
part
of course.
and everything else. So I'd probably say 2 years.
2 years, fair, fair. I mean, a lot of people tell us that, it's a lot of work goes into a book, and I think Some authors find it frustrating that they can spend 2 years reading a book, writing a book, and then it can be read in 3 days or something, and it's a little bit deflating
I,
maybe.
that's true, but I find it gratifying too. I mean, I've had people tell me they read it in 2 days, 3 days, and that makes me happy, really.
Well, it means that they wanted to finish it, right? They didn't drag through it. They wanted to find out what's going on. It makes it a page turner, and I suppose that's a compliment as well. Yeah. So I'm gonna ask you if you'd like to go ahead and tell people where they can get the book, or just plug your website or something like that.
So the book is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, wherever online books are sold. And there's a website. It's like the title of the book, theplasmacellreport.com.
Cool.
And on the fourth page of the website, if people have any would like to correspond with me, they they there's a field for them if they'll and I'll be happy to answer their questions.
Cool. I'll put a link to the website in the show notes anyway. But I loved the book. It was a great story. I didn't know what it was going to be about just from looking at it. And then I wasn't expecting the political elements and things like that. But of course, the de-aging process and whether or not that can be duplicated in other people. There's a fantastic concept, and it's really a good story. You were also kind enough to sign the inside cover for me there, so I appreciate that. And Joel,
You
I'll
know,
ask.
we haven't really talked about that one part of it. Is I honestly believe that it is possible that we'll be able to reverse aging. I mean, my tagline in my book was, "Whatever can go forward is can go backward."
Yeah.
And there's something that turns on the aging clock. There's that process progeria where children age from the time they're 1 years old, and by the time they're 10, they're 90. And something turns on the aging process, and then we get older. So if there's something that turns it on, it's not a magic wand. There's
Hmm.
something that can turn
Stop
it
it.
off, block it.
I suppose
And
then my question would be, I guess I want to ask, why would we want to? Why would we want to stop it?
that's a good question. I mean, I think people have always been in search of the fountain of youth, immortality in some ways, but I don't think anybody's ever pondered living virtually forever.
Hmm. I certainly don't think I would choose the option myself, but some people would, and of course, I don't know, maybe rich people would, celebrities, those types of narcissists for sure. They might want to, keep going forever as well. And even just normal people might be curious and I don't know what the uptake would be if the option was available. But it does raise good questions. We do see, okay, well, if people can live forever, or even not forever, even if they can just live massively longer, well, then you've got a population problem straight away. So that's why we get to the political aspect. If 50% of people live 50% longer, that's already a massive problem for a government.
We're already running out of room on the planet and running out of resources.
Yeah.
And there's a natural cycle. I mean, there's a little bit of sort of a moral philosophy that I infuse in it.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
And
my degree's in ethics and philosophy, so it interested me looking at it from that perspective. But then you have to ask, well, is it okay for because in this book, the decision is being made really by the United States government about something that could affect, everyone in the world. And you have to ask, well, should it go to a more universal body? I don't know. Should it go to the UN or something? Does one president have the right to make the decision? Um,
well, it's
or
interesting. About 30
oh,
years ago, they cloned a cow. They cloned a cow. I think the name was Dolly, and the world reacted really badly to it. And
mm,
then there was a big outcry against cloning because they didn't want human cloning.
of
And
course.
I think it's been banned, you know, universally, um, because that was something that science can do a lot of things. Some are very good, and some can be very bad.
Yeah, I suppose the scientist's job in that case is just to figure out what can be done. But then we need other people, whether it's politicians, philosophers, whatever, to decide, well, what should be done and what can we allow people to know can be done. And then you have to have that second layer. But fantastic as a concept. Surprises me though to hear that you think it is possible. I kind of assumed it was more just fictional. So that's interesting to me.
Say it again.
I'm surprised that you think it is actually possible. I didn't realize that. I thought it was just a piece of a fictional idea, you know, but you think that
No, I,
genuinely we
I
could do
think
it
if you look at my afterword of the book, I actually believe that it's not possible right at this minute, but
eventually.
I think that there's clearly something that happens that turns on the aging clock.
Hmm.
And there's all those theories of aging that I go into. And again, if something can go forward, it can go backward.
I
And
mean, yeah, I suppose so. I suppose so. It makes sense. Well, Joel, it's been lovely having you on the show. As I say, I love the book as well. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask you one last question that we asked to everyone, before we let you go. If there's any book that exists that you wish you had been the person to write, what would that be?
I'm sorry about my dog.
Eardrog's fine. Don't worry.
Ask me one more time.
Yeah, if there's any book that exists that you wish you had been the one to write it, what would it be?
Oh, I don't have a good answer for it. I mean, my favorite living author is Eric Larson, and I love all his books, but I don't really have a good answer for that.
Okay, maybe something by him then. Well, I'll put a link to the website as I say in the show notes. And it's been a pleasure talking to you, Joel. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Dean. Okay, you too.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye bye.